You know you're not supposed to chase trends. You know that. But you've seen this genre pop up over and over again, and you think maybe it's not really a trend. Maybe it's something that's going to keep going on. Maybe it's going to have perennial fans, and maybe it's worth investing in the long term. But how do you know for sure? After all, what happens if you get really invested in something that ends up just being a quick blip on the book genre radar and then no one cares about it? I have some great tips and tools for you to figure out whether something is a trend or whether it's going to stick around. And while I know that some of you out there are all about genre bending and genre breaking and mashups, having an idea of what is a trend and what actually has long-term staying power really helps with those things as well. And one of the ways to take books that are a bit quirkier and make them profitable is to add in judiciously different kinds of tropes and ideas and concepts from long-standing genres. And so to do that, you really need to know if something is a trend or if it's actually going to stick around. So stick around as we discuss all about this in this episode of the Author Culture Podcast. Hey there, I am Janeen Ippolito, and I have 15 years of experience in the publishing industry, in case you didn't know, and I'm also a huge nerd over genres, especially science fiction and fantasy genres and subgenres. And if you listen to previous episodes, you know that I've actually really focused in on figuring out how this particular massive genre breaks down into all the different subgenres. Because the thing is, I believe that because of how creative and how innately weird and quirky science fiction and fantasy authors are, we're constantly trying to figure out new trends and ideas and things. And that's why our genre in particular is always spawning new subgenres and subgenres and mashups and those things, because at our core, we love to ask that question, what if? But you also want to break even, at least if you're listening to this podcast. Maybe you don't want to write super cookie cutter formula. Maybe you don't want to abandon all this and write to romance, which is one of the perennial big money makers out there. But you do actually want to break even. You want to make a profit. You want this to be sustainable. And I get you. And there is a place for you in the author world, in the professional, taking it seriously while also having a life world. So we're going to talk all about how you're going to find those connections today. But real quick, if you haven't already, do make sure that you are subscribed to the Author Culture Podcast on iTunes or Spotify. We have a great YouTube channel. And also, feel free to leave a rating or a review. All of those things help more authors find the fantastic content I'm putting out to help you reach your sustainable success in your unique way, according to your life season. All right, now here is one truth we do have to face when we're talking about studying the market and trends and genres. The only way to really absolutely positively know if something is sticking around is to honestly study it for years and years and see if a particular genre or concept is sticking around. So if you're looking for absolute guarantees, the only way you can do that is actually by studying things backwards. It's just the way that it goes. I was listening to a new webinar from K-Lytics, and he's using all of this data collected from the last 10 years of tracking different genres up and down the market. That's 10 years of data. And so if anyone is going to tell you that a genre is guaranteed to stick around forever or guaranteed not to, the thing is, people can't fortune tell in this. Really. Okay. And so if they're telling you it's guaranteed without having that actual data that comes from actually studying things for years, they are lying to you, plain and simple. So with all of that, as you are going into this area and as you are testing things out, do understand that you do need to collect some data. Do understand that there is always a risk that even after you do your best guess and your best estimation, you could be wrong, because the only way to truly know is to actually have that long-term data to study. But I did say that I was going to give you tips and tricks on whether a genre or a new potential mashup genre was going to stick around or just be a trend. And I am here to do just that. And as long as you use these things judiciously, and as long as you gather your own data and you maybe don't pour $500,000 into publishing crazy amounts into something before we're giving it a chance to see if it has legs or not, you'll be okay. This is the market. Things can change rapidly. World events can affect people's buying choices and reading choices, as well as many other factors. And so you have to factor all of that into your predictions. But there are ways that you can manage those risk factors and ways that you can make informed choices to choose genres that both will connect with you, but also do have a strong chance of sticking around and not just being a flash in the pan trend that goes out just that quickly. First, does this new genre combine two well-loved genres? One of the best evidences for this is actually the new genre of romantasy, which romantasy used to just be a casual, informal mashup term that was used often on social media among reader groups, etc. But now romantasy is a thing, and it combines two well-loved genres, romance and epic fantasy. And what it does is by putting in those romance tropes, it makes something like epic fantasy more accessible to readers who are coming from Romancelandia. And there are many, many readers in Romancelandia, and they tend to be whale readers, which means they read a lot and they read fast. And so in this area, we have two well-loved genres. We have the romance genre, with all of the tropes and all of the expectations. And then we have the fantasy genre, and we have people who are hungry to see them combined. So I do predict that romantasy is going to be around much longer. I don't think it's a flash in the pan thing. Now, of course, you have to understand that every year certain genres will just sort of peak anyway. But what you're looking for is not a genre that's going to peak and then fall away, because chances are you're going to miss that trend, but a genre that even with the peaking and then falling away, it will still maintain a pretty steady sales number. And I think that romantasy has a really good chance of doing this. So when you're looking at these new genres, are they combining two existing genres that are both well-loved, that both have readership? Conversely, if we look at the steampunk Western genre, which is actually a genre, but here's the thing. Steampunk has a much smaller reader base, and Westerns comparatively have a much smaller reader base. So if you combine those, and with the understanding that people in the steampunk world may not love Western tropes, and people in the Western world may find steampunk tropes a bit weird, they may not naturally meld as well, a steampunk Western subgenre doesn't have the same chance as a romantasy genre at having staying power and consistent regular readership. The second thing I want you to consider is, does this new subgenre, this new genre, etc., connect with felt needs or desires? So people often buy books based on what they feel they need, especially fiction books. Fiction books are often used as escape. Fiction books are often something people want to escape into after a long day. They want to relax into them, or they want to go on a scary, thrilling adventure that's an escape from their everyday life. So when you're thinking about how this new genre is going to work, think about, does it hit a felt need in any way? Again, pulling out romantasy here, it hits that felt need. It has the need for romantic escape and everything. And then combining elements of epic fantasy, that's even more escapism, because we're talking about secondary world. We're talking about issues and problems that are definitely a reprieve from the everyday issues of, can I pay my bills? It lets you go into a completely different world. So it's hitting some felt needs. And the interesting thing that I've seen online is that in order to kind of hit those felt needs, there are actually some changes being made, especially to the epic side of things, which makes people a little bit cranky sometimes, because in order for people to escape into romantasy, maybe they don't want all those complicated words for things, and maybe they just want their own slang, and maybe they just want things to feel a little bit more like a college dorm room experience and a little less like weird and strongly cultural. And that's where you see more of the wallpaper world building coming in, where people want that more standard feel to things. They don't want to have to remember a whole list of different terminology. They don't want to have to remember a ton of different geography, because that's not the goal of the overall escape of that book. And it's interesting because traditionally with epic fantasy, all of those crazy, amazing names and ancestry and all of that stuff is part of the world building. It's part of the expectation. You expect and celebrate info dumps in epic fantasy. But then you bring in the romance readers, they don't really jive with all of that in-depth political intrigue in the same way, or at the very least, a little goes a long way for them. They're also there for the romance and for the relational intrigue. And so that's been a really interesting friction point with this particular growing genre. And to pull back to a genre that's a little bit out of science fiction and fantasy, but is coming into science fiction and fantasy, that is the rom-com, which is the romantic comedy. This is an established genre mashup that we don't even think about being a mashup anymore. We're just like, oh, it's a rom-com, it's a romantic comedy. But that means it's a comedy that's romantic. And it's meeting that felt need of people who want to enjoy elements of comedy and romance, and they don't want things to get too serious. Maybe their life is full of drama, or maybe drama and all of the different soap opera feels, that's just not something that makes them escape. That's something that stresses them out. They want lighter. And so that's where you have the romantic comedy. And then often you'll see that romantic comedy attached into fantasy genres. And so you have the urban fantasy rom-com, which I have a duology published actually. You see these elements coming into the cozy fantasy genre. You'll see cozy urban fantasy or cozy epic fantasy, I guess. I'm really curious to see where that goes. I don't think it's possible because cozy and epic are two different things, but we will see what happens and it will be exciting. So with all of that, you're taking this very familiar thing of a rom-com, which itself is a mashup, and then you're putting that into fantasy, and it's meeting that felt need of wanting to escape, but wanting to escape in a very cozy, low-stakes way, everyday way, not something that's going to require you to think of a lot of complicated terms and big picture machinations and all of that. It doesn't mean those things don't sell, but this is meeting people's needs right now, and I predict again that cozy fantasy with rom-com elements and with mystery elements is going to stick around because it's meeting people's felt need to feel cozy at the end of the day. Will it go through peaks and valleys? Of course it does. Every genre does. There are times when people want dystopian more and people want cozy more, people want thriller more, etc. Those things change. But there are genres that are sort of mainstays that even when they're not at the top, they still have a loyal fan base and they will still make sales and connect with readers because they're connecting with those core felt needs and they're connecting with things that readers already love and putting them together. A third thing that you want to consider is, does this new genre have timeless elements or have elements that connect to some kind of universal story? This one's a little more nebulous to pin down, and in some ways it depends on the tropes you use and who is writing it and all of those things. But a good example of this is the resurgence of fairy tale retellings that happened about 5 or 6 years ago, where it started being more popular to have fairy tale retellings. And now fairy tale retellings are a regular mainstay. And the thing is, they've always been a mainstay of the publishing world, more or less. They've had their peaks and valleys, but now with indie world making it more possible for you to create your own reader tribes and to have those tribes be tropified, those tribes can also be genreified. So they can also be connected to fairy tales exclusively as readership, and they only want those things. And you can have those kind of segments now instead of having it be something where readers have to pick around and choose because there's only so many books out there. We don't have that issue anymore. There are many, many, many more books out there than readers could ever read, and I include the romance whale readers in that. But one reason I believe that fairy tale retellings are popular is that, first of all, there is an ongoing connection with a larger story. Fairy tales really use a lot of tropes and universal themes and ideas of good versus evil and right versus wrong and justice and mercy that really connect with people, but they can also tell those stories in more simplified ways or complex ways. So they can distill all of this truth and provide a platform for the author to share thoughts and ideas, but they can do it in a way that is accessible, that connects with readership, that follows familiar patterns so it can be cozy, but also is something that can be made edgy and different and can shake up things depending on what the author wants. And so fairy tales, they've really stuck around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then they had a resurgence, especially in indie world. And I do predict they're going to be a mainstay in the future simply because they tie into all of those universal themes and those universal concepts of right and wrong and justice and mercy. This makes them timeless. And in addition to that, they are very adaptable because often the core storylines are simple. They may not be simple in terms of the message that they are conveying, but the plot line is often relatively simple, especially the most adapted fairy tale retellings like Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, those kind of stories. And so because of that, you can take that core idea and drop it into all kinds of other genres. You can make it edgier, you can make it sweeter, you can make it more stabby, and you can make it less stabby. And you can go into all those directions with it while still maintaining that core vibe of the fairy tale. And because of that adaptability, this also is a good signal to their staying power in the future. So when you're thinking about whether a new genre or subgenre is going to stick around, make sure that you consider these core ideas before you decide to take that risk and step into that genre or subgenre. Does it combine two or more well-loved genres? And do these two genres mesh well together, or does it favor the genre that brings in more readership? Does this new genre or subgenre connect with core felt needs or desires? Is it something that is going to have immediately accessible takeaways for the readers? And does it have evidence of perennial enjoyment or timeless universal elements that really speak to some aspect of the human condition, but are adaptable enough to modern times so that people can both connect with it and put it into new frameworks? It's totally worth it to consider all of these aspects when you are eyeing that new genre or that new subgenre and considering whether or not you want to write books in it or adapt ideas contained within that genre into your own story. So what do you think? Agree? Disagree? Do you think romantasy is going to be totally out of the woods in a couple years? Do you think fairy tales are passé? Did I miss a genre or subgenre that you really wanted me to highlight? I would love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas in a comment on social media, Substack, or YouTube. And who knows, I might address them in a future episode. For right now, this is Janeen Ippolito of Author Culture. Go forth and be awesome.